And needless to say, when he left there, he continued that for the rest of his life. And those who knew him knew how impeccable he was about his cleanliness, and everybody knows only too well about his fitness. So in the 1950s, through a fellow called Archie Punch, who used to be the chairman of City Tatts in those days, or on the committee, George was working for Archie in the construction business, and Archie got him a job at City Tatts running the gymnasium. And George stayed there then for many, many years afterwards. And all of us were introduced to George, all of us who used to train with him and run with him were introduced to George through our association with the gymnasium, and then onto the run. So that was in around the 1950s. 1961 they decided to start a running group, and they, for some reason, started in town first, and then they came out here to the park. And the thing has been going here at the parks ever since, for 51 years. And along the way, I started about 10 years after that. But along the way, George trained many, many, many super athletes, Olympic rowing teams, rugby union teams, rugby league teams, many Australian rugby league teams, many Australian rugby union teams. There was any amount of people, individual sports people used to come and just train with us so they could train with George. And he invented a lot of the training things that you see today. And I mean, I go to other gyms occasionally these days, and you see, and people are still doing some of the things that George did and started doing. And I know some of the things that we used to do are frowned on today, but we didn't know any different in those days. So we sort of got through. Some of us are still running, and some of us still can't run. We used to piggyback each other and do silly things. But anyway, it was all a lot of fun. And secret when you was piggybacking someone, always get with the little people. So anyway, so along the way we had a lot. When I first started, there was only 2 or 3 girls running. And look around today, it'd be 50%. So over the years, that's evolved. And now the guys run, they run with their wives, they run with their girlfriends, girls come along, they meet their future husbands here. It's always been a good source of matrimonial bliss along the way. I don't want to tell any stories, but I know plenty.
Including your own.
Oh, don't worry about me. So I know along the way. So anyway, here we are today. George died in December last year. We thought about what we could do, and someone came up with the idea of a plaque and a tree. As we are running around the park here, you notice in different parts of the park there's some trees and there's plaques under them dedicated to certain things. And we thought, well, what a great idea that would be, and have it up here where George originally started to run from. And there used to be a big tree over here, which I think is rotted, and they had to cut it down. Yeah. So anyway, we spoke to the people at Centennial Park Trust, and they said, well, we've got a pretty new tree up here. It'll last for another 50 or 60 years. And this tree is going to grow as big as some of these other trees here. It's only a young tree at present. And so we thought, well, we better to put the park next to a young tree, so that it's got many years ahead of it. And then there was a lot of talk about what we should have on the plaque, but eventually someone nutted it out, and we've got this plaque here that's going to stay here when I'm long gone and everybody's long gone, and we hope that there's young people on the run now, and we hope that they will continue, and people will continue after them and their children. And you know, Tommy's bringing his son here today. And, he's only a little young man, and we would like to think, and he's running with us, and we'd like to think in years to come that he will be nucleus of the running group. So, when those days come, and Mr. Plaque will still be here, and we owe George a tremendous amount. He brought all these people here today, and many hundreds of people all over the place. He brought these people together, and he brought us together through this common cause of being fit and health. And George always said, and along the way, I know he used to train all these athletes, but the majority of people that trained with George weren't super athletes. They were just normal people like all of us. And George always said it's about quality of life, and that's what it's all about. Quality of life and your own health and well-being. So train to your ability, push yourself a little bit. But George always said, just make sure that could present you with a good quality life, and you should be able to live longer and enjoy yourself longer. And that's what we're all about. So, after saying those few words, I know that Jimmy wants to say something. And where's Huey? Do you want to say something, Huey? Come out here, mate. Huey, when I first came on the run, Huey was an old runner. I thought, geez, he's an old bloke.
I remember George, when he started running, he asked me to go over and run with him, and there were about 4 or 5. And it was something I hadn't run for years and years. And I remember the first day I got home from the run, I could hardly get out of the car. My legs were all seized up. But I enjoyed it. I respected George greatly. And he changed my life. Now in gymnasium, he changed my life. And this running changed my life. So I've got a great deal of well, I owe him a lot. He changed my life by getting me fit. I wasn't fit at the time. I was very unfit. And introduced me to all these wonderful people who have been my friends for 50 years. So I'm over here to pay my respects to his memory, and as we all are. And I look back over the years with all the things the good times I've had with George. He was a unique man, and it's wonderful that Charlie and Ricky have gone to the trouble of pursuing this. This is what George would like. He loved this place. He loved Centennial Park. He would love to have a memorial here. He didn't. He was quite a private man in very many ways, and this is a nice thing for him to have his memory of his life and what he's done for so many people. So my memories of George are wonderful, and I think this is a great thing that you guys have organised to do in George's memory. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Huey.
Would you like to say something?
I haven't got any good thing to add on about George. My memory is George, when I first met George, 1972, he said, "You just follow me along." We sort that out. That's it. From then on, I've never stopped coming every Sunday, except I'm going on holiday. The only thing I like to let all your newer members know is keep up the tradition of George Daldry, because George always starts, like Charles and the other captain, John Healy, we start warming up and go and split up in all different groups, and not just when we start, all I know, G.O. go. Never mind, you get lost anyway. That's not the way we do it. That's not the tradition. We always start together, finish together. That's the way it should be. So I hope all the new members should keep that in mind, and that I may not be running another few more years. Anyway, it's all right. And we'll take some photo afterwards. Anyone want to say anything else?
Thanks, Jimmy.
Does anyone else want to say anything or not?
Well, perhaps
Charles?
I remember George
right from the late 50s, early 60s, both for City Tatts, of course, and North Bondi Surf Life Saving Club. And I first met George down in the pool, and he never forgot me for this. He was down with a hook, a surface to air supply, cleaning the tiles of the pool, which underlines your comment about his cleanliness. And then I made the big mistake of sitting on his towel. I never heard at the end of it after that. And then we tried to get a burgeoning cross-country route from amongst the Harriers, because the Harriers have always been so fit. And we had a couple of expeditions down the Snout with George and the guys, and I've got great memories of him. But he was a wonderful man. No, I remember I used to run all those years until I had surgery in the late 90s. It stopped me, but I always remember nobody wanted me for the piggyback. I always knocked it at the little Jimmy Chen. But no, wonderful memories, and a great man. And I always used to remember one day, what was his name? Barry. You know, he just had a leg replacement. We used to run with him. It was the only club in the world where you could run with a Garbo on the one side and the Prince of Monaco on the other side. George said, never forget the egalitarianism of the City Tatts. Wonderful memories. Thank you, Charlie.
I like to say to George, I used to run a laundry up the road here. One day I wasn't there, and this gorgeous blonde turned up with a bag of washing and wanted to know whether we could iron the underwear. Who gets their underwear ironed? Anyway, George came to collect it and wanted to know where the boss was, and I wasn't there, and my wife said, he's got a back problem, he's a physio. And he said, yeah, really, tell him to come to the gym and I'll fix his back for him. Yeah, well, 700 stairs later. Many times. But I think the other side of George, that I'm not the only one who received something really special from him, and I'd like to give thanks to that. After a session, we were sitting in the coffee shop having coffee in those things that seat 6 of you, and I got cramp in my left arm. And he pulled me out, dragged me back to Tatts. A little while later, I had bypass surgery. So the guy saved my life. But what he did after that was more amazing. He used to come up to my shop and pick me up every day of the week and take me out and make me walk. And eventually took me down there when it was still 17 degrees in the pond and make me swim like dog paddle until I could do it all over town. Back down to Vaucluse, walking up hills backwards. And I know he did it for more than me, but I really appreciate what he did for me, and I know he did it for lots of other people. That saved my life. So there you go.
Sorry, Don. Rick wants to.
Not much I can add to what everyone said about George. We go back a long way, but knowing George today, he's a very humble person. We're very proud today to see everyone here to respect him. And as Jimmy said, we hope this tradition keeps going, because when George first left, everyone thought, shit, it's finished. But we had people like Huey for a while was captain, then John Daly, then Charles. And it's not easy. George showed whoever he trained, he didn't give anyone an easy task. He didn't treat you any different than he treated Kerry Packer, George Bush Senior, Albert and Monaco, you and us, or you and I, all of us, he didn't treat any different than anyone else. As long as you put in and done what he said to you and do it properly and done your best effort, George would never say, oh, well done, or you say, thanks, George. He'd say, good, thank you. And that was George. But while we've got Charlie here, they do a terrific job. And when Charlie's not here, you've got Charlie's lovely wife, Diane, does it, or Carl, or young Tony, or Michael Stiles. As long as that keeps going, Tommy's young bloke, maybe another 30 years, might be still up here, he might be the boss. You've got to keep it going here and in the gym. Because what George gave us should never be forgotten. Thank you.
Good on you.
Yeah, as
relative of George's here, and I'm pretty sure I am, because the other two, one's in a nursing home, and my brother's actually got an exam tomorrow, and he just couldn't make it. George had a very competitive nature, which didn't sort of come out here, and if you don't know him, didn't know this, but he was always very competitive, and when we started, originally that was just a 3-miler around the park, and then eventually he added on the left turn at the Stone Bridge to go up the hill, and that turned into, when you turn left at the Stone Bridge, that turned into a sprint up to the gates over there, and then back down, and then the big run up the finish here, and then later on when we started doing the big tours of the eastern suburbs and even down to the Opera House and whatever, it'd be so funny, you'd see the newbies come in and they'd be taking off 100 mile an hour, next thing you know, George would do a left turn or something, and maybe, where is everyone? Oh, they're gone. George made the runs a lot of fun. Didn't matter how fast or how good you were, everyone sort of came together because he changed it. It was never a set course. It was always very different. But, went to the same areas, but he just changed it within the course. And, George was a true inspiration for those who like fitness, and I'll just say, keep it going.
Gordon brings my name. George used to know me as KU. The reason being is that I used to run with the slow group, and he used to leave a mark, and he says, "Hey you, will you wait here and tell the fastest where to go?" And he says, they don't realise, the fast group, that we know they cheat. And because what happened, he said, they go around the corner, he said, they stop and wait, get their breath, you see. And somebody else told me, they said, if you could follow George up Victoria Road, you can run a marathon. So I thought about that. I was about in my 40s, and I decided to run a marathon by the time I was 50. But I got addicted. I ran about 12 marathons. Radar has done similar things like that. Because we used to pass each other on the track. He'd go flying past me. But now I'm 80, and people say, oh, you don't look it, but it's all due to George. I was supposed to be dead at 23. I was invalid out of the Navy. I wasn't supposed to do this and that. You know, all the experts, they tell you what you can't do and what you shouldn't do. But when I met George and started running, there was another guy who frankly brought me along here. It was in the days we used to be able to go to the toilet in the bus depot until somebody robbed the bus depot and you're no longer allowed in there. But what you put in is what you get out. And I just thank God that I got to know George early enough so that I'm still enjoying retirement at 80 plus. And just keep it up. Despite the fact I live on the Central Coast now, I still come down to the other end of the park on a Sunday morning with Dave and anybody else who turn up. We walk. But the benefit down that end is we got the toilet block. And when you're old, you need good. So I remember George. I think those who knew George will remember him. And I think in due course, most of you other people who are new to the running and come in here on a Sunday morning, you'll find, despite George, it was all worthwhile coming here. A couple of hours in your week, you'll find it does you good. Thank you.
All right, I think that we want to...
Get
hang on, you're going to take a photo with that. What are you going to take? 2 people at a time? That's all I've got to...